I did my makeup for this video. It's got the orange for Camp Half-Blood and the blue for Percy. Anyway. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Glad you could be here today. If you haven't been here before, my name is Cameron and this is my book channel. Today we are going to be talking about adaptations because the Percy Jackson series just finished premiering in its entirety. So, I am a huge Percy Jackson fan. If you saw my 2023 year in review video, you saw that I reread the original Percy Jackson and the Olympians series and the Heroes of Olympus series in preparation for the new TV show that was coming out. I was definitely looking forward to it. I ended up really enjoying it. But while it was going on, I posted a TikTok about some of the changes that I thought were justified, completely made sense.
It's so annoying that they keep figuring out everything so quickly. Y'all,
demigods literally have to know these myths to save their life. Personally, I'm not a demigod. Obviously, they're fictional. But I know most of these myths just because I am queer. Like, if your life literally depended on knowing these myths, I would personally know Echidna, the mother of all monsters. I would know Medusa, which is like Greek mythology 101. I would know the Odyssey like the back of my hand, y'all. Like, it makes way more sense for these kids to figure it out quickly rather than what happened in the book, where they were like, there's all these lifelike stone creatures. Like, I wonder who did this. Like, Rick is allowed to look back on a series he wrote 20 years ago and has since written like 3 other series about and go, yeah, I don't think that made sense. I think I want to change it. You guys just need to calm down. But yeah, so I posted that TikTok and almost all of my comments were talking about how little they liked the changes that this series was making versus the books. So that kind of got me thinking that I wanted to discuss what makes a good adaptation. I also wanted to see if there was ever a scenario where a movie or a TV series could make changes to the source material and maybe even make it better sometimes. So come join me today on this very rambly video while we discuss this. So I have seen quite a bit of adaptations in my life. I mean, obviously, I grew up with the Harry Potter movies. I watched the Hunger Games as they were coming out. In the grand scheme of things, we see adaptations be made every single day, primarily in the movie format, but we have recently been seeing a lot more TV shows get adapted. So, what does an adaptation have to have? I kind of came up with a list. I was doing a lot of Googling and also just a lot of like asking people their opinions about this. And I made a list of 5 things that I believe has to take place in order for it to at least get the level of good adaptation. First thing, plot. Does it follow the base points of the story? That doesn't mean they necessarily have to follow, like, here's exactly what happened in the book, but are they hitting every single benchmark that they are supposed to be hitting regarding the main story of the book? One of the biggest things, I think, in my personal opinion, is the character portrayal. How well do the actors understand their characters or play their character? Another thing that I think an adaptation really needs to have to hit that benchmark of a good adaptation is respect of the readers of the original book, or the fan base if it's big enough to have a fan base. And I'll dive into all of these a little further. The fourth thing is, what message is the media trying to convey? Now, when we get into it more, you're gonna see that maybe sometimes that message can change, and I'll talk about a very specific movie that comes to mind when I think of that. So the final thing, which I don't think is required for all medias, and you're gonna see why when I say it, but the involvement of the author a lot of times, assuming they're still living and it's not being made years after. Obviously, we can't be like, oh, we're making a Dracula movie. We have to have Bram Stoker involved because he is long dead, which is why I say I don't think it's required for all medias, But I do have a belief that a lot of movies or television shows that have come out recently that have heavily involved the creator have a lot of the times produced a better product in the end. We will be talking about all of those, and I'll be talking about both the Percy Jackson movie and the Percy Jackson TV shows, and maybe some other examples. Now, do I think all 5 of those points, or 4 depending on what you're adapting, need to be present? No. And I think that's where we're gonna spend some time discussing. Getting started right now with the Percy Jackson TV show. Base plot points. So, essentially, oh, also spoilers, if you haven't somehow seen the show or read the books or anything, I don't think this is the video for you, so I'll go ahead and tell you that now. Thanks for watching this far if you have. But the plot, let's talk about that first. The base plot points of the original Lightning Thief book are Percy sees a lot of weird things growing up. A Minotaur comes after him and takes his mother as he's being taken to a camp where all half-bloods can be. He gets claimed by Poseidon. He gets put on a quest to retrieve the Master Bolt. He decides he also wants to rescue his mom. He takes Grover and Annabeth, and so on, so on, so on. A lot of the base points, like immediately going to Medusa's and encountering the Lotus Hotel and other things like that, were all present in this adaptation. Perhaps I should also say, this adaptation heavily involved the author, Rick Riordan. He was one of the head writers, he was one of the executive producers on the show. He was heavily involved. He actually was the one who ended up pitching this TV show. Of course he's gonna stick to his plot. He also, for the movies, read one version of the script and didn't like it and cut all involvement with the movie. And that really shows in the products that kind of came out. You can tell the TV show was made with like a lot of love and devotion towards the characters and towards what they wanted to convey, while the movies feel very shallow. You could tell people who really loved the source material worked on the TV show, while the people who worked on the movie only were really making a movie. That shows. Now, the big thing that a lot of people in the comments of the TikTok that I made and various other videos that I saw, or tweets, or posts about the series, was that they didn't like how the kids figured everything out. That being said, that TikTok that I played for you earlier, my TikTok, was talking about how, hey, it actually makes more sense for them to know these things. There were definitely changes made to the plot. Now, there were several fans that were not a fan of this. They liked the kids struggling through everything. That being said, Rick wanted to make changes. This is something he started working on 20 years ago. He's allowed to look back on it and reflect and say, okay, what would make the most sense for this format and regarding these characters? I personally think it makes a lot more sense for the characters to know what myths they're facing and still struggle with them. Going back to the idea of, does a good adaptation have to stick exactly to the plot? I mean, if you think about it, let's take one of my personal favorite adaptations, Coraline. Now, a lot of that movie follows very strictly the plot of the original novella, and it's an excellent adaptation. That being said, Wybie, the character, if you've never read the book, doesn't exist in the book. He is solely there to help Coraline voice a lot of her thoughts out loud. That's a pretty big plot change, I would say. He also does several things to move the plot forward. Does that ruin the quality of this adaptation? I don't personally think so. That being said, maybe it does ruin it for somebody. I don't know. But I'm overall just kind of discussing, can changes be made? So the next point that I made was actors understanding their characters, or just truly casting. Did they get the right vibe? Now, if you've seen any interviews with any of the main kids from The Lightning Thief, you'll know those kids are pretty dead up like their characters. I would say they are not the only ones who really get their characters. I mean, look at the entire Lord of the Rings cast. particularly Viggo Mortensen. So much of the reason why those movies are so beloved is because the casting just totally nails it. Are there changes in this? Yes. I think there are always going to be changes in every adaptation, even if the original author of the source material is involved. It's a disappointing part, but there's a reason why books are different than any film media. But some good casting and just actors truly getting in on their characters can really bump up the level of an adaptation. And the kids and all of the actors involved in Percy Jackson and the Olympians TV show really nailed it. I particularly really loved the casting beyond the main three of Sally. She just totally got it. And I think that boosts up the level and the quality of the adaptation. So, moving on to the respect of the fan base. I know a lot of Percy Jackson fans didn't necessarily feel respected by this interpretation of the source material. They didn't love that they went ahead and added the gods in early. A lot of gods, actually. The only one who makes an appearance for most of the Lightning Thief is Ares. So the addition of Hermes, a lot of fans felt, was maybe a little disrespectful. They didn't like that he showed up and kind of told them exactly what they needed to know. Now, that being said, there were still absolutely Easter eggs in this series that alluded to a lot of stuff about fanbase. I mean, the Pegasus, when Percy is really little, is canonically Blackjack. Rick has literally said, hey, that's Blackjack. Also, you being able to hear Nico in the background of the Lotus Casino yelling for his sister Bianca. Clearly, this was a series that was made with the fans in mind. Going back to The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson, the director of this series, knew these stories like the back of his hand. He did a really, really good job understanding his source material, knowing what he liked as a fan and what other fans would enjoy, and incorporating that into the story. Sure, they had to make plot sacrifices, but they also put in extra work to add extra details that maybe only eagle-eyed fans would notice. So the next thing is kind of, I don't really know how to phrase it other than the points being made. What is this interpretation of the story putting an emphasis on? So, I noticed in this version of The Lightning Thief, they did a really good job writing in more details about why Luke, for instance, resents the gods so much. They also spent additional time building up the character of Poseidon, who we really don't see very much in the original Lightning Thief book, because they wanted to emphasize the nature of having bad parents and having parents that are not present and having a really, really messy family, and how that has affected the kids and even the former partners of these gods. They took a lot of work to do that. I mean, the entire edition of Hephaestus in this version was to emphasize, hey, everybody involved in the god's family has the short end of the stick sometimes. And I think they did a really good job presenting it in a way that was palatable to everyone. And I didn't feel like they really got to that level in the original series until the 4th or 5th book, probably. One of my favorite movies, honestly, one of my favorite movies of all time is the 2019 adaptation of Little Women, directed by Greta Gerwig. Is that an exact adaptation of the source material? Absolutely not. I do think Louisa May Alcott, however, wanted to make different points than Gerwig did when she was writing the screenplay. So Jo has a really excellent monologue in this movie version about how she doesn't feel like she can be an independent woman. She doesn't like that she is forced in a situation in a society where she has to have a man in order to accomplish anything. That is definitely not in the source material. Gerwig actually borrowed from Louisa May Alcott's personal life and then what happened during the publication of Little Women, where she was forced to pair Jo with a man. That's a very different point that's being made than the original source material. In that time, Alcott could have never just outright said that in a book. Thank goodness that Gerwig is allowed to say that in the movie, but Alcott couldn't have said that during the book. So now we've got two different points of view or points being made. That being said, I think adaptations should do this, I think there is always an opportunity for them to move forward with the times and make different points than they originally made. So, kind of woven in with everything, I discussed the involvement of the author. Like I said, not all adaptations are going to be able to have the involvement of the author, but there is a very clear difference between how Percy Jackson the show was and how close of an adaptation it was and how much people cared for it and how hard they worked on it compared to the movie. And I think that made all the difference in the world. I think the TV show could have very easily become something like the movie if they didn't have the involvement of the author. That being said, do I think that Percy Jackson was a good adaptation? Yes. Do I think it had its issues? 100%. I do think there was a pacing issue. I think they were trying to figure out what to do with 8 episodes of 30 minutes, which is much longer than any movie we could have gotten, for sure. But I think there was definitely a difficulty getting its footing. That being said, lots of TV shows don't have the best first season, and it takes them a season or two to grow into what they're doing. And Rick and a lot of the showrunners listen to what fans have to say. They want to create the best product. So I have complete faith that it is going to get better if you didn't love the first season. I really liked it. I thought they did a great job with everything. I love when adaptations kind of make some changes. I liked the change from them just meeting the deadline of returning the Master Bolt versus them missing the deadline, but in change getting to see Poseidon put aside his pride and stand up for his son. I think a lot of those changes really, really help the story. And I think the kids knowing the myths that they're facing up against was also very good. So, I thought that was a good adaptation, but I also wanted to talk about some adaptations that I think are really good adaptations that I really like, and some adaptations that are not good adaptations, but are excellent pieces of media. I have a few of the really good adaptations that I really like that only made slight changes. So, one being Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is an excellent movie. Of course, it's one of the most famous movies, I would say. And it still really holds up. For a movie that was done quite a while ago, like, a lot of it really, really holds up. But this adaptation consulted with the original author, Michael Crichton, often. It does have a different tone than the book. The book is a lot more of a horror book than maybe the movie is. But they did take the time to consult with the author. They asked him for his input on changes. And I think the product is absolutely worth it. Another great adaptation is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which, excellent book if you haven't read it. The movie's really good, but the book is also very excellent. The only change that I can think of off the top of my head is they did, because it was a film, they took away the narration aspect. But otherwise, a lot of the scenes are straight out of the pages of the book. This one might be a little out of a lot of people's niche because it is a lot older of a movie. But To Kill a Mockingbird, the movie that was released in the 60s starring Gregory Peck, they did cut out some of Scout's narrative and some of Scout and Jem's parts. But the thing that really pushes this adaptation above and beyond is Gregory Peck's performance. And him just truly understanding the character of Atticus Finch and really working hard to get that correct while he was filming the movie. And then my final one is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Great movie, great adaptation. This might be one of the few movies that I think is a good adaptation, but even built more into what the source material had for it. They kept a lot of Charlie's narration from the book verbatim in the movie. They followed the plot beats almost exactly. I think Logan Lerman just really, really got it. I'm sorry he was definitely the best part of the original Percy Jackson movie because he just gets it. Logan Lerman just gets it. And that even got more elevated, not only from taking passages directly out of the book, but adding a really incredible soundtrack, letting the actors kind of interact more than what Charlie's limited narration could actually provide. Now let's move on to some decent adaptations. that did make some pretty drastic changes. I have already mentioned Coraline and Little Women, which are both fantastic movies. But if you want a page per page of the original book, you're probably not going to find it. That being said, the creative teams on both of those things were really, really passionate about what they were doing. And I think the work behind the scenes definitely indicates and magnifies how good an adaptation will be. So here's another one that is a pretty good adaptation. I think they were definitely limited from making these movies instead of a TV show. But the Hunger Games trilogy, I've not seen the new one yet. I'm sorry, I haven't seen it yet. But the Hunger Games trilogy, the screenplay was actually written alongside Suzanne Collins. She is listed as one of the main screenplay writers. They did have to cut some stuff for time. I do think the constraints of the media a lot of times do not allow for certain things, which is really, really disappointing. But those are some pretty good adaptations. And that's due to almost entirely the author's involvement in making sure they understood her vision and what she was trying to convey with the original book series. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is also a really fun take on an adaptation. It is an adaptation of The Odyssey. Believe it or not, if you've ever seen that movie, you could kind of tell they took a lot of the plot beats directly from that. And obviously they put it in a new setting and kind of gave it a fresh look. This is what I'm talking about with letting adaptations conform to the times. Obviously it's not set like today, but it is set in a environment that is a lot more familiar to us rather than on a boat in the middle of an ocean by Greece. The final adaptation that I want to talk about today, which is not a good adaptation, let's be clear, but is definitely a great movie, is The Princess Diaries. Mia's grandmother is really not in the books very much, and her dad is still living. The author actually made the choice, Meg Cabot, I don't know how you pronounce her name, but the author of The Princess Diaries actually decided to make the choice to cut Mia's dad, to essentially kill him off, in favor of having Julie Andrews play the grandmother and kind of bump up that role significantly more. That's a really, really great movie. It has been a long time since I've read that book. I should probably try rereading it, but I do distinctly remember preferring the movie so much more because they wanted to make different points with it and they wanted to expound on certain things that they didn't really explore in the original novel. Sorry this video was so scrambled. Overall, the Percy Jackson series was a good adaptation. Were there changes that people didn't like? Yes, but every adaptation is going to see changes. Some bigger and some smaller. But at least it's better than the movies. Thank you all so much for joining me on this video today. I want you guys to tell me what some of your favorite adaptations are. And if you think they're even good adaptations, if you just think they're a great movie, but a terrible adaptation, let me know. Comment down below. Of course, like, comment, subscribe. If you like the work I'm doing here, feel free to ring the notification bell. I would love that. You guys can find me on TikTok at CamBird or on Instagram at BirdsBooks. If you want to see more content like this, please let me know. And otherwise, I hope you all have a great day. Go reread your favorite book that got turned into an adaptation and rewatch your favorite movie adaptation. And also go visit your local library. Otherwise, I will see you all later. Bye!